What's up everyone, this is Mark and I've had a lot of people asking me for a video about how I learned to speak Thai like this.
วันนี้ครับท่านผู้ชมเรามีทั้งหมด7คู่ที่จะขึ้นมาชกบนเวทีนี้ครับรับรองความมันไปตลอด2ชั่วโมงนี้ครับกับมวย3ยกโดยที่มีนักกีฬาที่มาจากประเทศเมียนมาอิหร่านฝรั่งเศสฮ่องกงบราซิลโมร็อกโกและประเทศไทยอีกด้วยครับคู่เอกของเราในวันนี้ครับจะเป็นคู่ที่6อัศวเทพสิทธิ์หมวดนิดพบกับอิสราเอลดอสซานโตสจากประเทศบราซิลในพิกัดน้ำหนัก59กิโลกรัม Ladies and gentlemen, we have a total of 7 bouts lined up for you all, exciting 3 rounds of Muay Thai action.
That is of course me hosting the Muay Thai on Channel 7 HD, which I do 3 Saturdays out of every month at Lumpini Stadium. I'm also going to put a link in to a podcast that I did, the Buddha Bless podcast. It's all in Thai, the host and myself. For an hour and some change, we talked about, me coming to Thailand, learning the language, integrating into Thai society, getting my Thai citizenship. We talked about Buddhism, Muay Thai. So if you want to hear me speaking Thai long format, you can go and check that out. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of tell you what I did to learn Thai. But if you're looking for a magic bullet, some kind of a solution that, that's what it is, you're in the wrong place. Those don't exist. I'm too honest to sell you that snake oil. So, starting off, when I came to Thailand, I didn't know how to say anything in Thai. I didn't speak a lick of it. And I learned, as everyone does, how to say hello and thank you. And then what I did is I learned how to say how much. But the problem was I didn't know how to answer because I hadn't learned how to count yet. So I started to learn how to count. Now at this point here, I still didn't even know that Thai was a tonal language. I was just wondering why they would say something to me 4 times the same way. And I was like, what? And they're like, no, you're saying it wrong. I'm like, I'm saying exactly what you're saying because I had no idea it was a tonal language. Anyway, but it didn't really matter because when you're saying commonly used phrases and sentences, they understand what you mean anyway because they're so commonly used. That doesn't mean that pronunciation and tones aren't important. They're very important, but in very basic stuff, they'll know what you mean. Anyway, so I decided I wanted to learn how to speak more Thai. So I got some books learning how to speak Thai, and I was really frustrated because each book wrote things differently. Pom, in this book was P-O-M, this book was P-H-O-M, the tone mark was different, the word pai, to go, is P-A-I in this book, B-A-I in this book, P-B-A-I, B-P-A-I. It was such a headache, so I thought, well, I'll learn how to read and write Thai because surely there's only one way to write pai and pom. So I learned how to read and write Thai. Now, I was quite lucky because I bought the book Thai for Beginners by Benjawan Pumsan Becker, and I'm not going to go out there and say it was a good book, but it was definitely the best book at the time. And that's because it was structured in a very intuitive way, but also the alphabet. I've often seen some of my friends go to these language institutes and they teach the alphabet from A to Z or A to Z. I don't agree with doing that because the only time you need to know the order is if you're going to recite the alphabet, or if you're flicking through a phone book and you kind of know where you are because you know the order of the alphabet. But it's much more efficient to learn them according to the 3 classes of consonants. They've got high class or mid class, low class. Each book might give a different word for that, but that's effectively what it is. You start with the mid because there's like 11 of them or so, and they're used very often, and the tone rules are pretty simple. Then you go to the high, and then you finish off with the low. That's what you do. That's how I did it, and again, not through my own genius, the book structured it like that for me. Winner. Now, I don't agree with using apps. I just don't agree with using apps for things. I've never met someone who speaks fluent Thai, like fluent Thai, hosting live TV in Thai, fluent Thai, who learned it from an app. I just, look, everyone's different. You do you. I just think that when you pick up your phone, your brain is primed to be distracted. I think if you find something you don't understand, it's so tempting to just, it's insidious. It's like an insidious type of procrastination because you'll hit on something, you go, oh, you know what, I'll go and Google what that means, and then you kind of come back. Whereas when you're doing the old school way, no devices around you, if you have a problem, you sit with it for a long time, you try and fix it. And you sometimes you can, you work it out yourself. And if you can't and you finally relent and ask someone what the solution is, you've been with that problem for such a long period of time that when you work it out or find out what it is, you remember it much more, I'm going to say much more solidly, in the sense that you really have a feel for it now. and it makes sense and it connects things together. Whereas if you have a problem, oh, it's that, okay, cool, boom, you're going to forget that next week. So yeah, I'm anti-app. Now, at around about this point here, I've probably been in Thailand a couple of months. So at the beginning, when you start learning to read and write Thai, it's kind of cool because you'd see some signposts and you could work out some words and get some letters depending on the font. For those of you learning how to read and write Thai, you'll know exactly what I mean by that. But it's kind of cool and you can learn new words and put things together. And after a couple of months of being in Thailand, I was able to read and write very basic things. I could form coherent sentences. I could engage in basic conversation. As long as the Thais I was speaking to would help keep it within, you know, my level of Thai. Every now and again, you'll speak to a Thai person who beautifully helps you stay in the realms of your understanding. Sometimes you get in a conversation with someone and they just assume your fluency to be way better than it really is, and you don't understand anything. So my Thai was improving, and at around about this point, a couple, 2-3 months of being in Thailand, I was learning, I would say about 50%, maybe less, from the book, and the other 50% was self-learned. So from the book, I'd already picked up the structures. I kind of worked out how the sentence structures worked. I had the words in, I could, you know, read and write somewhat. When I wanted to learn myself, that was much more powerful because I would want to go to the garage and tell them that I needed to change the piston. So I needed to, sorry, not the piston, be a bit more expensive, the spark plug. So you'd go there and, you know, หัวเทียน. I had to learn the word for spark plug. เปลี่ยน, change. The word broken, พัง, เสีย, แตก, หัก. They're not interchangeable. They mean different things. Like sometimes it's smashed, sometimes it's broken, sometimes it's broken that cannot be fixed. Sometimes it's broken, but it can't, they have different meanings. You start to learn these instead of relying on people around me. I challenged myself to say these things. Now, that meant that I had to construct the sentence, go and talk to someone, hear the correct version spoken back to me, and get it wrong sometimes, get it right sometimes. But I was using it in a situation where I actually wanted to use it, and that meant that I remembered it much more clearly than if I was sitting in a classroom with someone teaching me something pretty boring. Nothing against learning in a classroom, I just did it by myself. Now, at around about 6 months, I'm going to say I was definitely very conversational, very, very conversational. I don't want to use the word fluent because I wasn't. That is a hard word to define, but I was very, very conversational. My tones were, for the most part, on point. My accent wasn't. And one of the cool things about being at this point here was I would never, when someone said to me, do you understand that? I didn't want to lie and say yes, but I didn't want to say no and then stall the fluency of the conversation. So what I would do is I'd say carry on, because Thai is not fixed. The words are very flexible and they can change meaning. And I'm not talking about the tones here. They can change meaning depending on the context. And I kind of wanted to see if I could work it out based on what this person had said prior to that, what their next sentence was, the overall vibe. And I wanted to work out, do I know what that means? And sometimes I could work it out and I would ask them and I was right, and sometimes I was wrong. But either way, I didn't interrupt the fluency of the conversation, and I stuck with the problem for longer. And I can't stress this enough. I think that sticking with problems for a long period of time is a good thing. People nowadays just find the answer, boom, in one ear, out the other ear, right? Now, at about 6 months, I don't really remember sitting down to study Thai anymore, in the sense that I didn't have a pen and paper studying it. But that didn't mean that I wasn't learning things. So I would listen to what someone is saying. I'd be reading from a magazine. I'd see an interesting sentence structure. I'd write it down. So I was still learning, if that makes sense. But I wasn't sitting down for a 40-minute period of time with the intent to learn Thai. It was more of a natural growth according to what I'd seen. And I was hanging out with Thais in a group setting, which is really cool because you'd see how the language is actually used. When you talk to Thais one-on-one, and you'll know what I mean by this, that you often find yourself talking about the same thing: where you're from, how long you've been in Thailand, do you like Thai food? And it gets a bit fatiguing. When you speak with Thais in a group setting, it's about the things they want to talk about. It's about their lives, it's about stories, and you watch the way in which they tell a story, you watch how they enunciate certain things, the way in which it's very, very interesting. You also notice that they don't use the word I or you very often, or he or she, which sounds bizarre at least from an English native speaker's perspective. So you really see how the language was used, and you'd also see that words didn't have such strict meanings, and the grammar wasn't fixed like it is in English, but they have sort of ways of saying things. And that's why I've always said to people, learn sentences, because that's far more powerful. Now, between this point and the 2-year point, which is where I would say it would be hard to argue that I wasn't fluent at 2 years, I was very, very interested in learning how the language is actually used, and I didn't merely want to understand something. I wanted to be able to use it. I think so many people, they'll okay, got it. I would drill it because I wanted to be able to say it on the fly. You know, just boom, on the spot, just comes out. I didn't want to have to and think about it. So practice saying things. If you've got sentences written down, say them again and again and again and again. Find reasons to use those sentences when you're in a conversation with Thai people. Bring that subject up so you can use that new sentence structure. Things like that will help lock it away, because being satisfied with merely understanding something is not going to make you good at using it. Now, on that point, what's quite difficult when you're learning Thai is Thais are lovely and they'll always tell you how good your Thai is. Your Thai is amazing, so good. But what does that mean if everyone's Thai is good? So you have to set your own standards. For me, the goal I had in my mind, at least, was to have a Thai person on the phone think that I'm Thai, right? Because that way they can't be deceived in any other way than just to hear me speak. And that's, so, you know, much, much higher standards. I didn't want to be just the white guy who could speak Thai. I know that sounds kind of strange, but I didn't want to just be the white guy who could speak Thai. I didn't want to be an MC who spoke Thai well for a white guy. No, I wanted to be an MC that was damn good. Now, whether I am or not, that's a whole different argument. We won't get into that one today, but I wanted to compare myself to Thai MCs. I didn't want to be an MC that you would forgive me for being shit because I was a white guy who learned to speak Thai. I didn't want that. I wanted to speak it to the point where you didn't notice that I was a white guy because I was just being an MC. So it's much, much higher standards. And, you know, you could see a lot of that being with how intently I was listening to people and how much time I spent trying to get the rhythm of the speech going on. Now I'm going to finish off with, that's kind of the arc of it, if that makes sense. I'm going to finish off with a few points here that I think need to be reiterated, that regardless of what you want to do on your journey to learn Thai. The first one is sitting down with a book for hours on end every day will get you started, but you need to immerse yourself. I was always very obsessed, not with learning the language, but with enjoying conversing and spending time with Thai people. Framing it like that gave me a very different perspective. That's not to say with a pen and paper isn't good, but you need to learn to hang out with Thais and let conversation flow. I got in an argument, as all cool people do, on Instagram with some guy who I can only assume his family tree must look like a stick of bamboo. The guy was a moron. He was saying that you have to learn 4 hours every day, you know, if you for 5-6 days a week for 2 years if you want to become fluent. And I was just like, no, I don't really agree. I think you need to look at how much someone's immersed. If you're fatiguing yourself with learning, it's going to be far less valuable than when you're going out and about. He's like, well, what do you know? I was like, well, I fucking did it. And then he wrote something in Thai, which I laughed because it was incorrect. And it turns out that I think he's Filipino, because he definitely wasn't Thai. And I showed it to some of my Thai colleagues. It was like, yeah, that's wrong. Turns out he's been teaching Thai for 5 fucking years. So yeah, you know, there you go. Those kind of people annoy me because they teach that you have to do this. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. What I put to you is this. Enjoy the whole idea of hanging out with Thai people, the fun, loving nature they have, the food, the delicacies, enjoying the food, sharing moments with people. Don't obsess just over pen and paper, okay? The next one is listen. Really, really listen. I've got a video about this. In Thai, for the most part, they don't have a word for yes. If you hear them speaking Thai, for the most part, yes, no questions are answered by repeating the main verb or adjective. Pai mai? Are you going? Pai mai? Pai. Chob mai? Do you like it? Chob. Aloi mai? Aloi. But when you speak to foreigners, chob mai? Chai. Pai mai? Chai. Suoi mai? Chai. It's wild because you've definitely never heard that. So really listen, because you will hear the correct version spoken back to you. Right? Now, oftentimes English native speakers speak bad English to Thais to try to help them out. But Thais don't do that to us. So whenever you hear it, it's for the most part pretty accurate. That being said, a lot of words are flexible in their meaning, and sometimes you'll hear someone say, "Oh, Mark, you're wrong. My Thai friend said this." And I had this recently with the word, there's no word in Thai for viper, right? As you follow me on my Instagram, I do like going out and catching snakes occasionally, and there's no Thai word for viper. This guy goes, it's the ngu male sao. I'm like, no, that's not. That's the Russell's viper. My Thai friend, well, your Thai friend's wrong. Just straight up wrong, because not only do I know for a fact there isn't, because I like catching snakes, I also went to the snake farm in Bangkok where they have a show and they milk them. I spoke to the snake expert and I said to him, why don't you have a word for viper? And he just said he doesn't know, but they basically have a word for venomous snake, and they've got words for, but no, not for viper. And this, sorry, a little bit of a rant there, but my point is this: when someone tells you, well, my friend said this, my friend says that, and they bring up the accolades, it's not whether they're Thai or the teacher's Thai, or I just listen to the way people actually speak and use the language, and that should be the thing that's the most important. Not me, not your Thai teacher, not your Thai book. Watch Thai people speak, because that is the language. And then I think the final one, which I've touched on several times, is the language isn't rigid. It's very, very flexible, and the words can mean a lot of different things depending on the context. And I'm not referring to tones here. So don't try to lock everything into like a definitive box. If you try to do that, you'll find yourself to be one of those foreigners who's been in Thailand for 20, 30, 40 years and knows everything, but then butchers the language when they speak it. The language is very flexible. It's fun. So don't try to like lock everything away into a meaning. Just have a look at the whole mood, what's being said. If someone says this word means this and they say it means that, that's actually possible. The way they use it in that sentence means this. So don't try and lock things away. So in summary, I do apologize. This is a completely unedited, just long video. In summary, I think that learning to read and write is going to be massively valuable. You can pick up books, learn signs, read from signs. The pronunciation is going to be a lot easier. Learn the alphabet according to what I just said there, with the middle class consonants, then the high, then the low. Immerse yourself in language. Speak to people. Don't put yourself in a box with meaning. Take things into context. Enjoy your conversation. Enjoy the journey. If you make a fool of yourself, you make a fool of yourself. If you think this word means that and you find out you're wrong, have a nice slice of humble pie. It's happened to it's happened to all of us, right? It's happened to myself. It's happened to Adam Bradshaw. It's happened to Adam Bradshaw between the two of us, where I've said you're wrong, and it turns out he was wrong. He said, Mark, you're wrong, and it turns out I was wrong. You got to be like, okay, cool, yeah, I was wrong. Now I've upgraded my knowledge and I can move forward with it. So there you go. That's how I learned to speak Thai in a nutshell, I guess. That's the advice I have. Enjoy immersing yourself in the language. If anyone has any questions or anything like that, any videos you want me to do about the culture, about the food, about Muay Thai, let me know in the comments below. And if you have made it this far, you're a hero. See you next time.